She didn't know who he was. She just saw a trembling body in the piercing silence of the early morning and did what her heart told her. She covered the man with her own coat, never imagining that this simple gesture would be the beginning of an irreversible turning point in their lives. In the cold darkness of São Rafael Municipal Hospital in Campinas, Clara worked her shift as she had on so many other nights. Young, dedicated, accustomed to the pain of others, but never to the unexpected. On the other side of the gurney, an unconscious man carried on his shoulders the weight of a fortune that could not cure him of his loneliness. What began as an act of compassion would blossom into something greater than either of them could have anticipated. And when the truth came out, neither power nor money would be enough to erase what had been awakened in that silent room, the immeasurable value of a sincere heart. At São Rafael Municipal Hospital in Campinas, the night shift progressed in silence, interrupted only by the delicate sounds of monitors and the discreet footsteps of the on-call staff. The cool lighting reflected off the clean corridors, creating an almost sacred atmosphere. Between the ICU beds, Clara Nogueira moved with precision and ease. At 26, she had seen it all. But that early morning, her calm expression hid the exhaustion of a routine marked by silent battles. For her, caring was more than a job, it was a purpose. In ICU Ward 3, Clara noticed something few would. One of the newly arrived patients was shivering, even under the hospital sheets. The air conditioning kept freezing the early morning hours, and the man seemed overcome by a chill coming from within. Without a second thought, Clara removed her own wool coat and carefully draped it over him. It was a simple gesture, but one made with heart. In that moment, she saw no numbers, diagnoses, or surnames. She saw a human being, and that was enough. The man Clara covered that morning was Augusto Vidal, founder of one of the largest technology networks in the country. His unshaven and slightly puffy face hid the same man who had graced magazine covers and conducted billion-dollar negotiations. Few knew that behind the sharp suit and the reputation of a ruthless strategist lay someone on the verge of collapse. A sudden heart attack had knocked him out during a meeting in São Paulo, and now he lay there, vulnerable, away from the spotlight and surrounded only by machines and silence. When he opened his eyes and felt the coat on his chest, Augusto was struck by the warmth, not physical but emotional. For the first time in years, someone had seen him without titles, without contracts, without dollar signs. There, lying under the cold light of the ICU, something began to crumble inside him. The gesture of that unknown nurse awakened a dormant uneasiness within him. How could a simple act of care touch so deeply someone accustomed to being served but never welcomed? Days later, having regained consciousness, Augusto asked to see the nurse who had lent him her coat. Clara entered the room without ceremony, as if she had experienced pain firsthand and was not intimidated by imposing surnames. He wanted to know why she had chosen that profession. Clara answered bluntly. It was during those long afternoons spent with her hospitalized grandmother that she learned the value of being present. For her, caregiving wasn't a technique. It was a living memory of love and gratitude. There are people who learn through pain what life tried to teach with care, Clara said as she adjusted the IV drip beside the bed. Augusto listened in silence, feeling those words like a mirror. He had always shied away from vulnerability. It was the crises that forced him to stop, and now, immersed in that forced pause, he began to see things differently. Perhaps the greatest investment he had failed to make had been in himself. Augusto was no longer the same man who had been admitted. Something in him had broken, and at the same time begun to rebuild itself with new values. The silence of the ICU and Clara's watchful eyes served as a wake-up call. He began to question everything, his priorities, his leadership style, the emptiness disguised as power. For the first time in years, success seemed small compared to the simplicity of a gesture made from the heart. As the days passed, Clara began to suspect the identity of this reserved patient, whose visitors spoke in hushed tones and carried folders bearing the logos of major companies. She didn't want to intrude, but she also didn't want to be deceived. It was Augusto who took the initiative. He asked to speak to her face to face. He told her who he was, what he did, and why he hid everything. He said that for the first time, someone had treated him like an ordinary man, and that he didn't want that connection to be lost in lies. Clara listened to everything in silence, in no rush to respond. Part of her felt betrayed, not by what he was, but by having hidden it. After all, trust, for those who care for lives every day, is not a luxury, it's a foundation. It's not about money, Augusto. It's about knowing who I'm dealing with. He understood. For the first time, he felt afraid of losing something money couldn't buy. And he realized that if he truly wanted to start over, he would have to be whole, not just generous. Augusto returned to look for Clara in the back hallway, away from the cameras and badges. "Without you, everything is empty again," he said, his voice a mix of vulnerability and hope. For the first time, it wasn't the executive speaking, it was the man. Clara hesitated, not out of fear, but out of conscience. She knew that such different lives required double the courage to intertwine, and yet she saw in him something that money couldn't erase, a sincere desire to start over with something real. Clara was clear. She wouldn't give up who she was. She would stay in the hospital wearing a lab coat and facing the early hours. If Augusto wanted to stay with her, he would have to let go of appearances and embrace life as it is, with truth and commitment. He didn't hesitate. He accepted each condition calmly. He promised to use his fortune not as a shield, but as a bridge. And in that silent pact between two worlds, something stronger than passion was born, a commitment to what truly matters. Months later, Augusto returned to the hospital, not as a patient, but as a partner. In his hands, he had the outline for a foundation dedicated to modernizing the public health system and supporting young nurses just starting their careers. Clara couldn't believe it. He wanted her to be president. "You were the one who taught me what it means to truly care," he said. And there, in that hallway where it all began, she realized that the quietest gesture she had ever made was echoing far and wide. One quiet afternoon, in the hospital garden where it all began, Augusto knelt before Clara, wearing a simple ring and a sincere smile. "Do you want to build a life with me, based on love and helping others?" he asked, his eyes brimming with tears. Clara accepted, but made one request, that they never forget where they came from. They wouldn't be a couple in appearance, but in purpose. And so, they sealed a commitment that went far beyond romance. It was an alliance with real life. The Clara Nogueira Foundation was born with strength and purpose, becoming a national benchmark in public health support. Hospitals were re-equipped, young professionals received scholarships, and hundreds of lives began to be changed behind the scenes. Even as president of the foundation, Clara never stopped working as a nurse. For her, caring for people was her core, not her job title. And alongside her, Augusto transformed his company into a model of social responsibility, proving that profit and compassion can go hand in hand. Clara and Augusto were expecting their first child when they began writing a new promise: to raise someone who knew the value of a simple gesture, like covering someone with a coat on a cold night. They knew that example speaks 1,000 words. In late-night conversations, they planned to teach the child empathy, service, and humility. More than an heir to wealth, they wanted to raise an heir to values, someone capable of transforming the world, starting with the heart. "When I grow up, I want to tell you how Mommy saved Daddy with a coat." That's how Augusto imagined telling his son the beginning of it all. Their story didn't begin with flowers or promises. It began with pure empathy. Clara, recalling that early morning at São Rafael Hospital, always said she hadn't done anything wrong. But Augusto knew. In that silent gesture, there was more love than in all the declarations he'd ever heard. During a simple lunch on the porch of her home, Clara asked, What if we built a free hospital, a place where no one would have to prove they deserve care? Augusto paused with his fork. Her dream was now his too. This is how the Hospital Esperanza project was born, a space for everyone, regardless of background, with dignified and humane care. A place where every patient was seen as Clara once saw Augusto. Clara and Augusto's story went beyond the corridors of São Rafael Hospital and began to be shared at conferences, universities, and even in nursing team WhatsApp groups. It was living proof that kindness still transforms. They continued visiting hospitals across the country, bringing donations, support, and the old coat that started it all. More than just a piece of clothing, it became a symbol. Because sometimes all someone needs to change is for someone to cover them before the cold takes over. What about you? When was the last time you did something simple, yet deeply human for someone? How many stories of transformation can be born from a gesture of yours that, at the time, seemed small? Clara didn't plan to change lives. Augusto didn't expect to be touched. But what brought them together was what many have forgotten: the power of presence, empathy, and genuine care. May this story inspire you to look around with more generosity and to start with a gesture. If this message touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each story is a reminder that the world still has healing, and it starts with each of us.